Hello everyone, this video is about the Irene-class cruisers. My favorite type of warship, my favorite ship is actually the Cleveland class of ships. I hope to do a video about the Cleveland class one day. You shouldn't be surprised that she's also my favorite ship in the game World of Warships and the game Azure Lane as well. Although I don't have her yet in War Thunder, but I'll get her eventually. And I hope to visit the USS Little Rock, the last surviving member of the Cleveland class of ships. I don't just want to do for forgotten steam ships of the early 20th century. I want to do World War II ships and Cold War ships that no one knows about, as well as tanks, aircraft, and weapons, stuff like that. The ones that no one knows about. And I also do want to do videos about the ships and tanks that are my favorites, like the Cleveland class, the American heavy cruisers, the Japanese heavy cruisers, Prince Eugen, Admiral Hipper. I want to do videos about those ships too, cause well, they're my favorite ships and all. And I changed the name of the channel to Stories of History because every ship, every tank, every gun and plane has a story behind it, and I want to tell those stories and share the moments that were experienced during their time in service and even beyond that. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the video. Irene-class cruisers were a monumental step for the Imperial Germany. In 1883, the General Leo von Capri became the chief of the Imperial Admiralty, and at the time, the pressing question that confronted all of the major navies was what type of cruiser to build to replace the obsolete rigged screw corvettes that had been built in the 1860s and 1870s. Cruisers could be optimized for service with the main fleet or for deployments abroad, while the largest navies could afford to build dedicated warships of each type. Germany, on the other hand, could not. The Reichstag's German Imperial Diet would not provide funding for such types. Furthermore, the Navy had completed the cruiser construction program under the Fleet Plan of 1873 with the screw corvette Charlotte, which removed Capri's ability to use an approved fleet plan to justify further cruisers. The previous practice of building rigged corvettes for overseas use and avisos for fleet defense against small craft would no longer be tangible. Despite the Reichstag's reluctance to fund new warships, many of the fleet's oldest cruising vessels were in need of replacement. The next scheduled to be replaced was the old screw corvette Elizabeth. Caprivi initially requested funding to replace the ship in 1883, which the Reichstag rejected. Caprivi, a general whose career had been spent in the Imperial German Army, created a Admiralty Council on the 16th of January 1884 to advise him, and the particulars of the next cruiser to be built were among the topics discussed. The council recommended a ship with the following characteristics: sufficient seaworthiness to prevent operations in all sea and climate conditions, enough speed to catch and evade likely opponents, cruising radius necessary for long-range operations, and gunpowder strong enough to defeat expected opponents, but not to exceed 5 to 8% of the ship's displacement. The council discussed the matter over the course of several meetings in January, which Caprivi recorded in a monumentum dated March 11th. The document, which laid out Caprivi's thoughts on future naval construction in general, included requirements for the first and second class cruisers. As work began on refining the proposals, the council set displacement at 3,500 tons for the first class variant. Armament as a main battery of 15-centimeter guns, along with 3 torpedo tubes. Speed was to be 17 knots, and the cruising radius must meet a minimum of 5,000 nautical miles. And the second class version was also created on a displacement of 2,200 tons, with scaled down specifications in all other categories. The fleet's chief designer, Alfred Deheist, set about turning these broad parameters into a proper design, but he quickly determined that no ship could be built with those specifications on the allotted displacement. He enlarged the first-class design significantly and increased the displacement to 4,300 tons, and completed the design on the 28th of April, 1885. Caprivi approved the plans on the 1st of May. The historians Hans Heiband, Albert Rothar, and Hans Otto Sadanmitz remarked that the new ships had all the disadvantages of a compromise, and that they would not prove suitable as a fleet cruiser. Derek Holtman concurred, noting that the ships were neither well suited for fleet work nor the increasing tasks in distant waters, like has been the case for most dual purpose designs until today. General characteristics: the ships were 98.90 meters long at the waterline and 103.70 meters long overall. They had a beam of 14.20 meters and a draft of 6.74 meters forward. They displaced 4,271 metric tons at design displacement, and 5,027 tons at full load. The hull was constructed with transverse and longhexagonal steel frames, and the outer hull consisted of wood planking covered with mixed copper sheathing to prevent fouling. The stem was made of bronze below the waterline and iron above. The hull was divided into 10 watertight compartments and had a double bottom that extended for 49% of the length of the hull. The ships were very good seaboats. They ran very well before the wind and were very handy. They lost minimal speed in hard turns and suffered from moderate roll and pitch. In heavy seas, the ships were capable of only half speed, as both suffered from structural weakness in the forecastle. They had a transverse metric height of 0.69 to 72 meters. The ships had a crew of 28 officers and 337 enlisted men. The ships carried a number of smaller boats, including 2 picket boats, 1 pinnace, 2 cutters, 1 yawl, and 2 dinghies. Searchlight platforms were added to the foremast, 13 meters above the waterline. Machinery. Irene's propulsion system consisted of 2 horizontal 2-cylinder double expansion steam engines that drove a pair of screw propellers. The engines needed to be arranged horizontally to fit them under the ship's deck armor. The engines were divided into their own engine rooms. Irene was equipped with a pair of 3-bladed bladed screws, 4.50 meters in diameter. Princess Wilhelm had slightly larger 4.70 meter long screws with four blades. Steam was provided by 4 coal-fired fire tube boilers, which were conducted into a pair of 2 funnels. Irene's engines were manufactured by Volkswagen, while AG Germana produced those for Princess Wilhelm. The ships were equipped with a pair of electrical generators that provided 23 kilowatts at 67 volts. Princess Wilhelm was later equipped with 3 generators with a combined output of 33 kilowatts at 110 volts. Steering was controlled by a single rudder. The ship's engines were rated at 8,000 metric horsepower and provided a top speed of 18 knots, though on trials, Irene reached a maximum speed of 18.1 knots, while Princess Wilhelm made 18.5 knots. The ships had a range of approximately 2,490 nautical miles at a cruising speed of 9 knots. Despite the original requirement to be able to steam for 5,000 miles, Dietrich had been unable to significantly improve the coal storage when he enlarged the design. Originally, the Wolfstheis engines were notoriously inefficient, Worse still, the horizontal arrangement limited the piston stroke, which further reduced their efficiency. Armament and armor. The ships armed with a main battery of four 15-centimeter RKL-30 guns in single pedestal mounts, supplied with 400 rounds of ammunition in total. These guns were placed in sponsons on each quarter. They had a range of 8,500 meters. The ships also carried 10 shorter-barreled 15-centimeter RKL-22 guns in single mounts. These guns had a much shorter range at 5,400 meters. The gun armament was rounded out by 6 3.7-centimeter revolver cannon, which provided close-range defense against torpedo boats. They were also equipped with 3 35-centimeter torpedo tubes with 8 torpedoes. 2 launchers were mounted on the deck, and the third was in the bow below the waterline. The ships were protected by compound steel armor. Thus, deck armor consisted of 2 layers. On the flat, the layers were 20 millimeters and 30 millimeters thick, for a total thickness of 50 millimeters. On the sides, the deck sloped downward and increased in thickness to 20 millimeters and 55 millimeters, totaling to 75 millimeters of protection. The combing was 120 millimeters thick and was backed by 200 millimeters thick of teak. The combing tower had 50 millimeter thick sides and a 22 millimeter thick roof. The ships were equipped with cork cofferdams to contain flooding in the event of damage below the waterline. Modifications. The ships were modernized in Wilhelmshaven between 1892 and 1893. The armament was significantly improved. The 4 L-30 guns were replaced with 15-centimeter SK-L-35 guns with an increased range of 10,000 meters. 8 10.5-centimeter SK-L-35 quick-firing guns were installed in place of the L-22 guns, and 6 5-centimeter SK-L-40 quick-firing guns were added. They were placed in pairs, 2 on the stern, 2 amidships, and the other 2 were either side of the foremast. The alterations to the ship's guns allowed the number of officers to be reduced to 17, though enlisted ranks increased to 357. Some equipment was removed in an effort to reduce the ship's excessive weight, including anti-torpedo nets, an auxiliary boiler, the steam winch used to hoist the ship's boats, and other miscellaneous equipment. Both ships had their funnels increased in height. Irene also had her bulwarks lowered and her anchor chains altered. After returning from East Asia in 1899, Princess Wilhelm received a minor refit that included increasing coal storage capacity, which came at the expense of 2/3 reduction in the magazine capacity for the 15-centimeter guns. She also had a searchlight installed on her foremast. The work was carried out between 1903 and 1905. Despite reports to the contrary, Irene was not similarly refitted at the time. Chapter 2. The ships of the Irene-class. SMS Irene was a protected cruiser of the cruiser corvette of the German Imperial Navy, and the lead ship of the Irene-class. She had one sister, Princess Wilhelm. The 2 ships were the first protected cruisers built by the German Navy. Irene was laid down in 1886 at the A.G. Vulcan shipyard in Stettin, launched on July 23, 1887, and commissioned into the fleet on May 25, 1888. The cruiser was named after Princess Irene of Hesse and by the Rhine sister-in-law of Kaiser Wilhelm II. Princess Wilhelm was the second Irene-class cruiser. Her only sister ship was SMS Irene. Princess Wilhelm was laid down in 1886 at the German Navy shipyard in Kiel, launched in September 1887, and commissioned into the fleet in November 1889. The cruiser was named after Augusta Victoria of Schleswig-Holstein, the first wife of Kaiser Wilhelm II. Chapter 3 Service of the Irene-class. Both Irene and Princess Wilhelm saw extensive service with the German fleet in home waters early in their careers. Both ships frequently escorted Kaiser Wilhelm II's yacht, SMY Hohenzollern, on cruises throughout Europe. Irene accompanied the Kaiser on a voyage to the Mediterranean Sea from 1889 to 1890, and Princess Wilhelm escorted Hohenzollern for a number of cruises in northern European waters, including 2 visits to Norway. Princess Wilhelm also cruised the Mediterranean in 1892 to represent Germany at celebrations marking the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's first voyage across the Atlantic. Both ships were refitted in the early 1890s. In 1894, Irene was deployed to the East Asian waters during the First Sino-Japanese War in June 1894, which led to the major European powers to strengthen their forces in East Asia. Princess Wilhelm joined her the following year. Princess Wilhelm was one of 3 ships involved in the seizure of the naval base at Jiaozhou Bay, leased territory, in November 1897. Led by Admiral Otto von Dyrix, Irene was in dock for engine maintenance at that time, and so she was not present during the operation. As a result of the seizure, the cruiser division was reorganized as the East Asia Squadron. Both ships were present in the Philippines in the immediate aftermath of the Battle of Malona Bay between American and Spanish squadrons during the Spanish-American War in 1898. Dyrus hoped to use the crisis as an opportunity to seize another naval base in the region, though this was unsuccessful. Princess Wilhelm returned to Germany in 1899 and was modernized from 1899 to 1903. Irene followed her sister back to Germany in 1901, but was not modernized. Both ships remained out of service until early 1914, when they were retired from frontline service and used for secondary duties. Irene was converted into a submarine tender. She served this capacity until 1921, when she was sold for scrap and broken up the following year. Princess Wilhelm was reduced to a naval mine storage hulk February 1914, and ultimately broken up for scrap in 1922. The Irene-class may not have had the most glamorous life or end, but there is something to learn from this. They were the first protected cruisers by the German Navy. They were the forerunners to all future German armored cruisers, including some famous ones like Prinz Eugen and Admiral Hipper, and that is something to be proud of. That's it from this video. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned something. Hit that like button and subscribe for more history videos like this one.